Hey everyone.
Hey guys.
Welcome to another Travel Therapy Mentor video. Tonight we're going to be talking about the process for getting started as a travel therapist, like a general overview. We've talked about all of these various topics in depth, but we've never talked about just like the general process. And what made us think about this is that we are actually in the process of starting a new travel assignment in the coming weeks. So we've been going through this whole process over the last month or two. And we thought with so many new grads contacting us recently and people getting ready to start traveling in the summer, it would be a good time to discuss the whole process from top to bottom. So Whitney's going to introduce us. I'm going to get this video shared in a couple groups.
All right, hey everyone. For those that may not know us, we are Whitney and Jared Kazaza. We're both traveling doctors of physical therapy. We both started traveling ourselves as new grad PTs in 2015, right after we graduated PT school. So we've been travelers for over, I guess it's about 9 years now, so going on a decade, which is hard to believe, of being involved in the travel therapy industry. These days we don't work full-time as travel PTs anymore. We primarily work on Travel Therapy Mentor, our online business where we mentor and educate other aspiring and current travel therapists. As Jared mentioned, we have done lots of videos over the years, written tons of articles on all the various different aspects of travel therapy, but today we just wanted to do kind of a bird's eye view of what does the process look like to get started from beginning to end. And this should be really helpful for a lot of you guys that are thinking about getting started soon as a travel therapist. So as Jared mentioned, he's going to share the video in a couple of groups so more people can join on with us live on Facebook. If you are watching live, we'd love if you would say hello in the comments. We know that a lot of you will watch later, either on the Facebook or YouTube replay, or listen on our podcast as well. So we appreciate you guys too, whether you're listening live or listening later. So just a couple of quick announcements before we dive into tonight's topic. As Jared mentioned, we are getting ready to take a travel therapy contract here in a few weeks, but right now we're actually in Mexico. We were in Mexico for the Club CoreMed trip, which is an all-inclusive vacation put on by one of the staffing companies that we work with called Core Medical Group. Each year, this was our 4th time going. It's a pretty sweet trip. Each year, Core puts on, it's like an incentive trip for loyalty for working for their company, and some of their healthcare travelers will qualify, so that includes travel nurses, allied healthcare professionals, therapists. So this year there were about 350 people all at this all-inclusive resort together in Mexico. Of those, there were a good 50 plus therapists, so we got to see some old friends and also meet some new travel therapy friends. It was a really fun event. Reach out to us if you are interested in learning more about the Club CoreMed trip. We'd be happy to tell you a little bit more about it, how you can get qualified, and also get you connected with one of our favorite recruiters at Core if that's something that interests you. But yeah, we have a couple extra days in Mexico now, and then in a couple of days we're going to be flying to Orlando for the AOTA conference, which is the National Occupational Therapy Conference. So if there are any OTs that are watching, we'd love to see you if you're going to be in Orlando at the AOTA conference later this week. We're also hosting a travel therapist meetup. That's going to be a smaller meetup of about like 50 people or so. It's for current and aspiring travel therapists, either those of you that'll be at the AOTA conference or if you're just in the Orlando area. We had a couple people sign up that are just like on contract or live in Orlando. So reach out to us if you want to join us this week at our event. But yeah, we'll be back after that next week. We'll be home for just a week before we go and start our next travel PT assignment. So as Jared mentioned, that's kind of what sparked our idea to talk about this process, because we recently have been going through the process of getting our resumes updated, getting submitted for jobs, doing job interviews, getting our credentialing and onboarding and all that stuff done. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about what that looks like.
Yep. Okay, so the first step is usually 2 to 3 months out. You want to start getting in contact with recruiters, talking to them, looking and see, like basically game planning with them, talking to them about what your preferences are, what setting you want to look for, what locations you're looking for. Try to choose which companies will be a good fit for you, what recruiters you like, and that you mesh with well. If you're more than 2 or 3 months out, that's the time when you just really want to be doing your research. There's not a whole lot of reason to be talking to recruiters or doing anything like that far out, because if you do, the recruiters, they're focused on the next people to get placed, and that's usually 6 to 8 weeks out. They're not going to be focused on someone that isn't going to start their assignment for a year. They want to talk to people that are ready to go soon. So if you're more than 2 or 3 months out, then that's when you just need to be doing your research, knowing what questions to ask in the interview, knowing what to talk to the recruiters about, what benefits you need, those kind of things. But once you're 2 to 3 months out, that's when you should start talking to recruiters and getting more of a plan in terms of what areas you might be looking at, what settings you might be looking at, all of that.
And we know that a lot of you are advanced planners, and we think that's really great if you are 6 months or more out from doing travel therapy. We've even had people reach out to us a year or more out because they are planners and they just want to get the process started. And we completely understand that. And we have so many resources for you to start doing your research and understanding the process of travel therapy on our website. We have something called a Travel Therapy 101 series. That's going to teach you all the basics of what it's like to work with recruiters, the licensure process, how does the pay work? You need to understand how the pay packages work. What is a tax home and why do you need to know that? So you need to start doing all your research well in advance for this. Now, don't panic if you are within a couple months of getting started and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm already behind. That's okay. You can dive in alongside talking to recruiters in that 2 to 3 month frame. But if you're more than 3 months out, we just don't think it's really that important to talk to recruiters. We have a lot of people that reach out and they're like, yeah, but I want to research these companies in advance. To be honest, if you research these companies, you're going to look at their websites and you're going to say, most of them have the same benefits. Most of them sound all right. The recruiter that I'm talking to, they all sound nice and everything. They'll be able to give you like an overview of what their company offers, but they won't be able to tell you anything about the actual jobs they have available for your start date until a lot closer. So I don't think that you're going to gain a whole lot by talking to recruiters more than 3 months out. And there are some downsides to it too. As Jared mentioned, the recruiter may not be as willing to like spend time with you. Also, you may get lost in the shuffle and they may lose contact with you, but because you may have gotten already put into their system, now you could be getting reached out to by a bunch of other random recruiters at their company, and that can be really annoying. So we really think it is best if you just wait until you're in that 2 to 3 month window to worry about the recruiter side of it. But during that before 3 month phase, hit up our website at traveltherapymentor.com. Educate yourself about tax homes. That's definitely something you need to know about. The pay packages, insurance is something to start thinking about. So there's a lot of things to be learning in advance.
Yeah. And if you are leaving a job, so a lot of times we get the question like, oh, I'm in a permanent job and I want to start traveling. What about giving notice? All of that. Most jobs you should give notice like 30 days in advance, and that's usually what we tell people for professional jobs. You probably want to do it about a month in advance. So that means that you'll usually start talking to recruiters and game planning before you ever give your notice at a job. And that makes sense for a variety of reasons. One, people will contact us sometimes that don't know much about travel and they kind of have unrealistic expectations for what they're going to find. So we'll talk to people sometimes that are like, well, I just want to find pediatric jobs around Salt Lake City. And if they quit their job expecting they're going to find that, they're going to be very disappointed because there are very few jobs around Salt Lake City, much less pediatric jobs. So you want to make sure that before you put in your notice at a permanent job, that what you need as a traveler is actually something that's realistic. And you can talk to us, you can talk to other travelers, but a lot of times the recruiters are the ones that are going to tell you if like what you're looking for is something they might actually be able to find, or if it's something that you're really going to have trouble finding. So probably once you figure out if your requirements as a traveler are realistic and there's going to be jobs for you out there, and you talk to the recruiter and they say, okay, right now I've got these options, that's when you'd want to put in your notice, not way before when you're not really sure how travel is going to work out.
Yeah, and so for some of you, you may also be a little bit worried about putting in your notice before you actually have a contract locked in. And hopefully the recruiters can go ahead and get you submitted for jobs, which we're going to talk about that process here in a minute. About 6 to 8 weeks out from when you would actually start. And so in an ideal world, you would actually agree to a contract before you had to put in your notice. But it doesn't always work out that way. Occasionally, you might still be in the process of looking for jobs and interviewing for jobs within that 30-day window where you do need to give your notice, or there are some companies that require a 60-day window. And I know that can be a little bit nerve-wracking, but again, this goes back to having those conversations with the recruiters 2 to 3 months out to understand what the job market looks like for your discipline, for the states that you're interested in, for the settings you're interested in, and then you'll feel more confident about your decision to leave your perm job knowing that you have a plan in place.
Yep.
So with that said, if you are within that 2 to 3 month window, or when you get to that point, we'd be happy to help you get connected with recruiters. If you visit our website at traveltherapymentor.com/recruiters, you can fill out our recruiter recommendation form. Again, we recommend you wait until you're about 3 months out to even fill out this form, because pretty much as soon as you fill it out, we're going to go ahead and get you connected, and the ball will get rolling from that point.
Yep. So the next thing you need to think about is licensure. This will be around the time that you start talking to recruiters. They tell you that what you're looking for is realistic. Then you'll start looking at what states you might want to go to, or maybe you've already told them. So say you already told the recruiter, I want to go to Texas, or I want to go to Arizona, or whatever. And they say, oh yeah, great, we've got a lot of Arizona jobs, or we've got a lot of Texas jobs right now. Around that time, you want to start working on the license for that state. So maybe 2 months out, around 8 weeks, probably 8 to 10 weeks out, start working on the license. Some licenses take much longer than others. Some you can get it really fast, so some maybe a week or two. Other ones like California might take 2 months. So you want to make sure that you give yourself enough time to get the license before you start interviewing for jobs, because there are some travel jobs that will not even consider you if you're not already licensed in the state. Because some of these facilities, they'll get burned on travelers that they apply for the job, they interview, they accept them, they have everything ready to go, and then the license gets held up and they're not able to start on time. And that puts the facility in a really bad situation. So there's a lot of facilities that won't even interview a traveler if they're not licensed in the state already. Now for PTs, obviously can be a little different. If you're from a state that is eligible for the compact and you're going to a compact state, then the jobs, most of the time, it doesn't really matter if you have the license or not, because you can get it in 24 hours or less. But if it's a state that isn't part of the compact, or if your home state is not part of the compact, then that's something you really need to think about ahead of time, and make sure that you're putting yourself in a position to get licensed and have your license before you start interviewing for jobs. And if you don't know how long a license for a state might take, that's where you can rely on the recruiters to give you some advice there. A lot of times they have an idea of how long it'll be.
Shout out to a few people that are joining live. If you're just now hopping on, we are talking a little bit about the process to get started as a travel therapist, and particularly right now we're talking about the licensure process. Hi Nimong, hi Shivaji, hi Rachel, hi Kayla, hey Mason, hi Kelsey. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you have any questions as you go along, feel free to just leave a comment in the comment section and we will answer it later.
One other thing you might want to think about too, and this is something we often recommend, especially to new grads or people that are not real certain they want to be travelers, is consider taking your first job in your home state. You'll already have a license there. If you take a job maybe a couple hours away, then you can get a feel for travel, what it'll be like, without being too far from home, to make sure it's something that you like. And like we've mentioned in prior videos, that's something that we did. We started our first contract about an hour and a half away from home, because we weren't sure if we were really going to like travel or not. And then once we did that first contract, we were like, okay, this was great. That's when we started venturing out further and going to other states. And I think that can make a lot of sense for new travelers.
Yeah. So I know this can seem a little bit daunting. Sometimes you don't want to apply for a state license before you have a job offer there. But unfortunately, because some of the licenses can take longer, as Jared mentioned, you usually can't do it in reverse. You usually can't accept a job, interview for a job and accept the job and then get the license after the fact. There are certain states that could be an exception, and the recruiters might tell you that. They might say like, hey, I know that Vermont wasn't on your radar, but I do have this great job in Vermont I could submit you to, and I know for a fact, for example, I'm not exactly sure this is true, but say Vermont is very quick. And so if they know there's what we call a quick license state, you could do it in reverse. But in most circumstances, as Jared mentioned, for example, like California, if you know for sure that you want to go to California, don't even worry about waiting to talk to recruiters. We can tell you right now, there's lots of jobs in California. So if you know for sure you're pretty far in advance, you're 3 months out, just go ahead and start applying for that California license, because there's no problem getting that one in advance. You're definitely going to find a lot of jobs there, and it does take a couple of months. So you do want to do that licensure in advance.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just in your best benefit to at least get 1 or 2 licenses going before you start submitting for jobs.
Yep. Ideally, you're part of the compact and you don't have to worry about that as much. But we've always gotten licensed the regular way in every state. All the states that we've worked at in the past, either the compact didn't apply at the time or they weren't part of the compact. So we've gotten licensed at every state that we've worked in. And some can take a long time, some it's not a big deal, but you just need to know ahead of time how long it might take, and understand that some jobs will not interview you for the job unless you already have the license.
Yeah, and your recruiter is a great resource, because they look at these jobs every day. They work with travelers every day who are applying for licenses, and they can let you know what that timeline might look like, if it's going to be quick to get the license or not. And they can also give you a good bird's eye overview of whether or not they see a lot of jobs in that state. For example, back when we wanted to work in New England, we ideally wanted to go to Maine. But a lot of our recruiters told us there just weren't as many jobs in Maine for us to find 2 jobs together at the time. So we ended up getting licensed in Massachusetts instead. because there were a lot more job options in Massachusetts. That worked out really well for us. We very easily found 2 jobs together in Massachusetts, and then we just traveled to Maine on the weekend for fun. So yeah, the licensure process, your recruiter can help you through that, but this is something that you're going to be looking into within that 2 to 3 month window before you start actually applying to jobs.
Yep. So around the same time, about 2 months out, is also when you're talking to recruiters, you're trying to figure out what recruiters you like, which companies are a good fit for you. We often get the question like, what travel companies are best, or which company should I work with? There's not a one-size-fits-all answer for that, and that's why we've gone through and interviewed over 20 companies now. It's because companies have pros and cons, and they have certain companies have more jobs in certain settings, certain companies have more jobs in certain areas. Some companies have benefits that a traveler would need, some have no benefits but really high pay. So it's a variety of things depending on what you need. So there's no one size fits all answer, and that's why you need to figure out a way to either find companies that might work well for your situation, or just interview a bunch of different people and try to find some that you like and find companies that work for you, because you need a good fit with the recruiter and you also need a good fit with the company. So that's something to keep in mind. If you have you could work with the best company for you but have a bad recruiter and your experience won't be great. And then on the other hand, you could work for a company that has very few jobs that actually fit you, but the recruiter is really, really helpful and you have a great experience. And so you ideally, to have the best experience as a traveler, you want to have a good recruiter and a company that has jobs that will match what you're looking for.
Yeah, and this is where we can help you out with that recruiter recommendation form. If you fill it out, you're going to tell us what interests you, what states you would like to go to, what settings, what's most important to you, and then of the about 14 different companies that we work with, we can help narrow it down for you, which ones we think might be the best for you. We have chosen to work with 14. We've turned away dozens more that we did not choose to work with. So we've interviewed, a couple dozen companies over the years and hundreds of recruiters. So we can try to point you in the right direction. So in this beginning phase, in the first few months, you're going to be setting up phone calls with these recruiters. You might talk to 3, 4, or 5 different recruiters on the phone. We have some recommended questions that you can think about asking them on our website. Questions to ask the recruiter, ask about their company, see who feels like they're a good fit for you. Once you decide on about 2 or 3 that you like, that you get along with, at this point is when you're going to set up what's called a profile with the company. And sometimes that can feel a little bit daunting too. You're like, well, I don't even know for sure if you have a job that I want you to submit me to. Why do you want me to fill out all this paperwork? But the way the process goes is it's really helpful for you to already have a profile set up with at least 2 to 3 different recruiters, so that when the jobs do pop up that you want, they can immediately submit your profile. They typically need a little bit more than just your resume to submit a profile for you for a job. So what does that look like? They'll need your resume, references. They might need you to fill out something called a skills checklist. Most of the time it's those 3 things. Every now and then they'll have you fill out a little bit more information, just like a formal application with your demographics and education history and all that kind of stuff. So once you officially have a profile set up with them, that's the point where they will be able to submit you quickly and efficiently to jobs when the jobs do come up.
Yeah, and you might think, oh, well, I'll just wait to do all that stuff until they have a job that I want. But we talk about this a lot, and this is very true. We found this again on our most recent job search. When you're job searching, things go really fast. There would be a job that would pop up, and then just a few hours later, we already have our application submitted. We've already had contact with the facility manager, and we set up an interview for the next day or later that day. So if you're waiting until a job pops up that you might want to get all of your paperwork in, well, then that puts you a day or 2 behind all the other applicants for that job. So you want to have everything ready to go and not be waiting when a job pops up, especially if it's a really good fit for you.
Yeah, and again, I know sometimes this can be a little frustrating, especially when it comes to references. You don't want to just hand out your references left and right. You don't want to bother your references, but that's why we recommend narrowing it down to about 2 or 3 companies that you like, and then you can just let your references know, hey, there are going to be either 2 or 3 different people reaching out to you. If you have the opportunity, maybe you could spread out and use different references for different companies. But it is in your benefit to go ahead and have those 2 or 3 profiles set up, even though it can be a little bit of a headache in the beginning.
Yep.
So at this point, once you have chosen a few recruiters that you like and you've gotten your profile set up with a couple of companies, they're going to start pitching job offers to you. So they're going to let you know, hey, here's a list of jobs that I have in the states and settings that you said you're interested in. Take a look at it, and if you have any questions or you want more details, often they'll just send you like a list that'll say like city, state, and setting. So it might be like, okay, Dallas, Texas, outpatient, and Austin, Texas, skilled nursing, and so forth and so on in the states and settings that you're interested in. They might just send you a list, and then you might say, yeah, I am interested in like these 3 or these 5. Can you tell me a little bit more? And they may have more information or they may not. And you can get these lists from a couple of your different recruiters. Now, if you see some right away that you absolutely want to submit your application to, that's great, but it could take a couple weeks. You might be kind of keeping an eye out for a couple of weeks before you really see something you want to jump on.
When Whitney says they may or may not have more information, they should always be able to give you at least a general ballpark, fairly accurate estimate of what the pay would be for the jobs. Mm-hmm. But there are some jobs, especially jobs that are through a VMS, a vendor management service, that they won't have a lot of details about. They might know the facility name, the city, the state, the setting, and the pay, and that might be all they know about it. And we get questions often where people are like, I think my recruiter's being shady, they won't tell me about the caseload or things like that. A lot of times the recruiters don't even know that information. If it's a direct client or if it's someone they've worked with in the past, then they will know that information, but not every recruiter has worked with all the facilities out there. So they might just see a job on a list just like you do, and they have to submit you for the job to even get more information about the job, or you might not get any of that information until you actually interview for the job. So there are some situations where your recruiter will know everything about a facility. And that is usually if it's an exclusive contract where they work very closely with the manager or the regional manager or whatever at that facility, or if it's somewhere that they've had a traveler at in the past. And then they've talked to the traveler and they know like, oh yeah, this is a really busy outpatient or this is a one-on-one outpatient. But there's a lot of situations where they won't know any of that. And it's not necessarily that they're trying to keep information from you, it's just that it's a difference in the type of job that they're presenting you.
Yeah. So this is a very interesting process, and by working with a couple of different recruiters, you'll see that some of them do things a different way. Some of them will just send you a full list of everything they have. Some of them will try to point you in the direction of ones where they've had a good experience before. For example, if you're someone who's a newer graduate, they might say, hey, I know of like these 3 facilities that I've had new grads at before, and I think they would be a good fit for you. Let me know what you think about that. And then you might say yes or no, and then you have to get more information from them. So it's kind of a good idea also. That's another reason why we recommend working with 2 or 3, because you can learn different things by the way that different recruiters do things. And maybe you love the way one recruiter is more transparent than the other, or just the way they explain things to you. So it's a good idea in this beginning stage to just be working with a couple of different recruiters. We recommend not usually more than 3, because it can just become confusing and a big headache if you have more than 3. But yeah, it's really in your benefit to talk to a few different ones. In addition to them doing things and explaining things differently, they will also have access to different jobs. They don't always have the same jobs.
Yep. If you guys have any questions on anything we've talked about, or anything we're about to talk about, any questions or comments, if you're a current traveler and your experience has been different, let us know in the comments. We'll cover that. Obviously not everyone has the same experience with every job search. And if you have any questions about anything we've talked about, let us know. I saw Madison ask a question. She said, are there any particular rules around taking travel jobs in your home state? I've heard mixed responses. Thank you so much for the awesome info as always. So there's nothing in particular a rule about taking a job in your home state. There are some rules in terms of tax homes. If you're taking a job too close to your tax home area. If, let's say, for example, you're taking a travel job that's 20 miles from where you live, well, you're not going to be able to get tax-free stipends on that job. It's not that you can't take the job, though. Usually you can take the job, you'll just make less money on it. And if you're taking any job that's more than an hour away, more than a commutable distance away, where you have to get housing and you have your tax home, then there's no issue with that at all. So it's not necessarily the difference being whether it's in your home state or not. It has to do with the distance away from your home location, the specific city that you live in, and whether or not it's a commutable distance in terms of whether or not you get stipends. And if you don't get tax-free stipends for the job, it's not the end of the world. You can obviously still take that job. You'll just make a little bit less money on the job.
Yeah, but it's not the state. As long as it's within, it's more than an hour or 2 outside of your home address, then you can work in your home state. We've taken many jobs in our home state, 2, 3, 4 hours from home.
Yeah.
Now, in regards to the job search, typically the recruiters are not going to be able to submit you to most job opportunities until about 4 to 6 weeks out from your start date. most travel therapy jobs, when they pop up, are listed as ASAP starts. ASAP can vary. Ideally, some of them would love to have you just as quick as possible. I mean, they would love to have you in a week or two if they could get you, but that's usually not realistic, right? So in the travel therapy world, ASAP usually means about 4 to 6 weeks. If you're further out than that, if you're 2 or 3 months out, every now and then they will know about a job far in advance where they're like, okay, we're gonna need someone July 1st, and it's March now. But that's a little more rare. Most of the time they're listed as ASAP, with the exception of school contracts. When we're in the spring, quite often they will already know that they're going to need someone for the fall. So right now, even, you might start seeing August start dates if you want to work for the school system. But for the most part with medical contracts, your recruiters are going to start submitting your application for jobs at that 4 to 6 week mark.
Yep, so you want to start submitting for jobs. Usually probably 8 weeks out is when you're really looking at jobs. Most of them, like Whitney said, are going to be 4 to 6 weeks that they're popping up. They need someone to start as soon as possible, and it's whenever you can get in there. You interview for the job, say someone else interviews for the job, and they have a better start date than you. They can start sooner. A lot of times they'll take the person that can start sooner because they just need someone soon. But yeah, 4 to 6 weeks is usually when you're going to be interviewing and being submitted for all these jobs, and things start moving really quickly.
Yep. And so what does that look like? So you have your couple of different recruiters pitching jobs to you, and that means that they're either texting you or emailing you a list of options. You are reviewing the options. Again, every recruiter should be able to at least tell you the city, state, setting, and basic pay. This is where it's really important that you have done your research to understand the pay packages. You want to understand what it means when they say this job is going to pay about $2,000 a week after taxes. Sometimes they can give you just a brief breakdown of the pay package. You don't have to go too in depth right now at this stage of the process of knowing exactly what the pay package is going to be like. Sometimes it can move really quickly. So it might just look something like this. One recruiter has Austin, Texas outpatient for approximately $2,000 a week after taxes. The other recruiter has Dallas, Texas outpatient for approximately $1,900 a week after taxes. And you're trying to decide, do I want to be submitted to one of these jobs or both of them or whatever. Now, where it can also get a little tricky is sometimes the same recruiter or two different recruiters will have the same job. So if both of them pitch a Dallas, Texas job to you outpatient, you need to ask what the facility name is. You don't always need to know the facility name in advance, but if you're trying to decide between what sounds like it might be the same job with two different recruiters, you need to find out if it actually is the same job or not, because you do not want to be submitted to the same job by two different recruiters.
Yep.
So at this point, they're kind of pitching some offers to you. Sometimes it can go really quick. Sometimes we'll just get a text that says, hey, there's a job in, North Carolina, let's say like Raleigh, North Carolina. It's outpatient. It pays about $18.50 a week. Do you want to submit? And we'll just say yes or no.
Yep. One thing you want to think about here is that you don't want to get submitted for too many jobs. And we get that question pretty often. People will be working with, say, 4 recruiters or a lot of recruiters, and they're all sending them a bunch of different jobs. They all sound pretty good, and some people will just be like, oh yeah, submit me. And things get really overwhelming if you're submitted to too many jobs at one time, because you'll have managers contacting you trying to set up phone interviews, especially if you're working at the time. It can get really crazy because a lot of times your phone interviews are going to be like on lunch or something like that if you're working. So you don't want to be submitted for way too many jobs. Also, if you're submitted for a lot of jobs, they usually want answers fairly quickly, especially if it's a job that is high demand, they have other applicants. Once you interview for the job, if they offer it to you, they're usually going to want an answer between 24 and 48 hours. Otherwise, they're going to start interviewing other people. So if you line up, say, 5 job interviews on 5 different days, you interview for the first one and it sounds pretty good, but you want to see what the one on Friday is like. The one that you interviewed for on Monday sounds pretty good, but you're trying to wait and listen and see what job fits you the best. The job on Monday is going to want an answer before you even get to the interview for the Thursday and Friday jobs. So you want to make sure that you line up your jobs, you interview for them, and if it sounds good, you want to be in a position that you could accept the job right away. If it doesn't sound good, then just pass, move on to another option. But you don't want to have a bunch of jobs lined up because it can get very overwhelming. So kind of do 1 or 2, maybe 3 at a time, interview for them. If they sound good, take it. If they don't sound good, pass on them, and then submit for more jobs after that.
Yeah. And it's important to know you don't have to feel pressured to accept a job. You should be working with a recruiter who's very understanding and very supportive. And if things don't sound good in the phone interview and you want to pass on the job because the productivity doesn't sound good, or because they don't have another therapist on staff that can train you, or whatever the reason might be, that's okay. You just need to be professional and let your recruiter know, this job just really didn't sound like a good fit for me. Thank you for setting up the interview, but I would like to pass. Yep. That's totally fine.
Yes.
Where it becomes more of an issue is if you're trying to string them along and make them wait a really long time for your answer, because you're just trying to weigh your options between another job. Now, again, you can stretch it out 48 hours, maybe 72 hours, 3 days, and let them know, hey, I really appreciate that we interviewed for this job, that you've made me the offer. I am waiting to hear back about this one other opportunity on Thursday. Would it be possible if I could give you my answer on Thursday? It's okay to ask and professionally let them know that, but usually they don't want to be waiting too long, especially if they have other candidates that they could go ahead and offer the job to. So this is just where it's really important to have great communication with your recruiter and try to get this process moving as quickly as possible and know that you're ready to make a decision. If you're at a point in your life, for whatever reason, where you're just still kind of feeling things out and you're not sure, it's probably not the best idea to submit for a bunch of jobs if you're not sure that you even want to take a job at all. So just keep that in mind, that sometimes the facilities will get their hopes up that you're going to answer them right away.
Yep. Hey, Nick. Hey, Juan. Thank you guys for joining. So actually, to go along with that, we just recently on our job search, we had a job that we interviewed for that sounded pretty good, but it wasn't perfect for us. And we talked to the manager, we told them our situation. Obviously, we have a pretty unique situation. We're not trying to work full-time, we're trying to work part-time. A lot of companies can't even accommodate that at all, but the manager was like, yeah, that'll be fine for us. And it sounded decent, but not great. And we were like, okay, well, we'll think about it. And a couple days went by, they asked for an answer, and we basically told them, like, hey, if you have other applicants, go ahead and take them. If not, we're still gonna wait and see if we have any other jobs that sound better. If we don't find something, then we might take it. But again, if you get any applicants, go ahead and take those. And then it kind of takes the pressure off of you, because then you say, hey, if you don't have any other applicants, then I could still consider this job. If you do, go ahead and take them, and that's fine with us.
Yeah, so open communication is just very important. And again, every job search is going to be different. It really also depends on your discipline, your specialty, how many options you have. If you are a PT right now, the PT job market is so good that you have so many options, and some of these jobs are just sitting open with no applicants. For example, that job we interviewed for, we kept checking back with our recruiter because we felt bad. We usually try not to leave anybody waiting for more than 48 hours. And we said, hey, we feel really bad that we haven't given an answer yet. Do we need to go ahead and just tell them no? And he said, as far as I can tell on my end, they don't have any other applicants right now. So they will take other applicants if they come through, but they just don't have any other applicants. So you might be in a situation where the ball is really in your court. You have all the options in the world, but you might be in a situation where you're looking for a very specific location, a very specific setting. You don't have quite as many options, and you really need to make a decision very quickly. So every job search is just going to be really different, but we're just giving you an overview of what this could look like.
Yep. Okay, so after you submit, ideally for 2, maybe 3 jobs, that's when you have the phone interview, and that's when you're trying to figure out whether the job is a good fit for you. And like we always harp on every time we talk about phone interviews, this is the most important step, because this is usually the only insight you'll get into whether the facility is a good fit for you or not. And this is the way also you differentiate between different jobs. So say you're submitted for 3, they all have similar pay, they're all in the setting you want, and they're all in locations that are okay with you, that you'd be willing to take. Well, this is when you try to figure out which one of those 3 is the best fit for you. So you make sure that you have a very thorough interview and you ask detailed questions. We have a list of questions on the website. We have articles about interviewing for our facility interviews, I guess is what we named it. And so you want to make sure that you go in with a list of questions that you're going to ask, and ask follow-up questions, and just make sure it's a good fit. Make sure it sounds like they're being honest and realistic with you about the expectations and all of those things. Don't get sold on a job too quickly. There are definitely situations where we have really, before we ever interview for a job, we look at the location, it looks really cool, we really want to go there, and then we get into the interview and we kind of overlook some red flags. We really recommend not doing that, especially if you're a new traveler, because you want to make sure that the job is a good fit for you. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good experience traveling. And it's much better to have a job that fits you well than to be in a perfect location in terms of your own life satisfaction. Because if you hate your job but you love the place that you're at, it doesn't matter that much because you're going to spend a lot of your time at the job. 40 hours a week. If you hate it, it's going to be very difficult to be in that area that whole time.
Yeah, so as Jared mentioned, we have a list of phone interview questions to ask the facility on our website, but some important things you might want to know are what does the caseload look like? What are the productivity expectations? How many other therapists are on staff? If you're a new grad, this is especially important to ask. Say if you're a PT, it's very important that there's another PT on staff. If you're an OT, very important there's another OT on staff. Somebody you can ask questions. What does the training time look like? What does the ramp up time look like? And then you can get into a lot more specifics, like what EMR do you use? What type of equipment is available at the facility? Things like that. But you'll have to tailor that depending on what type of setting or facility it is, of course.
Yep. So now once you've interviewed for a job, you find one that is a good fit for you. Say you interview for 3, one stands out, it's better, the manager sounds good, the productivity sounds easier, maybe it pays higher, you accept that job, right? That's when you go to whatever, when you tell the recruiter that you interviewed for the job through that you want to take the job.
Well, usually how it works is you'll have the phone interview. Most of the time you don't accept or deny while you're on the phone with the manager. Every now and then, if you just know it sounds absolutely perfect and they think they really want you, they might offer it to you on the phone. But most of the time, just to give ourselves flexibility, we'll just get off the phone and say, thank you for your time. We'll get back with you and let you know. And then usually within a day or so, maybe even right after, they'll get back to your recruiter and say, yes, we would like to extend an offer to them. We'd like to have them. And then you would verbally accept the job, assuming that you have enough information to accept the job. And enough information is usually the start date, the rough pay package, or maybe at this time, between the time that you have the phone interview and you accept, within that 2-day window, maybe the recruiter is sending you a more detailed breakdown of exactly what your pay package is going to be like. Maybe you're clarifying some things about the pay, like, well, am I going to get reimbursed for the license that I had to apply for? Some things like that. Make sure that everything sounds pretty good. Usually you verbally accept first before they actually type up and send you the written contract. And in the travel therapy world, a verbal acceptance is a pretty solid handshake. They do expect that if you have verbally accepted, that's fairly binding. Now, of course, it's not 100% binding. If you do get the contract and things don't look good and you need to back out, like, you still can.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they trust that if you say, yes, I'm taking this contract, that you really are taking the contract.
Yeah, so you don't want to take that lightly. You don't want to say, yeah, accept the job, and then know that you have another interview in 2 days that might be a better fit. You don't want to put the recruiter or the facility in the situation where you accept the job and then you back out of accepting the job. Like Whitney said, there are situations where, say, you have a death in the family or something big comes up. Okay, well, that's understandable. It's not like you have to go with this job, but it should not be anything like, hey, a better job popped up. I've already accepted this one, but now I'm going to go with that one. That's not a good excuse.
If that does happen, and which we do know some therapists that will happen with, just understand that if you do that, if you break the contract or you verbally agreed or even in writing agreed and then back out of it, that you are most likely going to burn the bridge with that recruiter, with that staffing company, and that location. They're really not going to like that, and that's just it's not the way you want to handle business. So if you decide to verbally accept a contract and say, yes, I'm going to do it, really make sure that you mean it.
Yep. So once you have a job that sounds good, you have verbally accepted, and the contract's written up, you sign it, go to your other recruiters, the ones that are also job searching for you, and say, I found a job that fits me well. I'm going to take it through a different recruiter, but I want to stay in contact with you and I want to work with you for my next job search. Assuming it's a recruiter that you do want to work with again. Then 6 or 7 weeks out, you get in contact with that recruiter again to start looking for your next job. Any good recruiter, any experienced recruiter is going to understand that. They know that you're going to be working with multiple recruiters so that you have the best opportunity to find a job that fits you well. So there shouldn't be any hard feelings there. Recruiters know how the game works. I mean, it's the same way for us as it is for them. They're working with a bunch of different people. We're working with a bunch of different recruiters, and you're trying to find the best fit for you.
Yeah, and you will have wanted to be transparent about that back in the beginning, back when you were first setting up your phone calls. Say, hey, I am talking to a couple of other recruiters. I am looking at jobs with different recruiters. Just be transparent about that throughout the entire process so there's no surprises. It's not a big deal. And then if you do receive an offer with a different recruiter that you decide to accept, just go back to the other ones and say, hey, I really appreciate your time and your effort. I'm sorry it didn't work out this time, but we can keep in touch for the next time.
Yep. I've already talked about reviewing the contract.
Yeah. And then again, so when you get the actual written contract, this is where you want to make sure that everything that you talked about verbally or kind of went back and forth on email, make sure it's all written in there. Again, on our website at traveltherapymentor.com, we do have an article that goes over what to look for in your written contract, things like your start and end date, any time off requests that you need in advance, like if you know you have a wedding to attend or something like that.
Hourly guarantees,
yes.
Notice, like if there's a 14-day notice or 30-day notice, whatever it is, whatever you've agreed upon, just make sure it's actually written in there.
Make sure the pay breakdown is exactly what you discussed. Run the numbers yourself for the pay package. Again, this is where it goes back to making sure that you understand the way the pay packages work. We have detailed articles so that you can understand the way a pay package is broken up. Multiply it out times 40 hours and make sure it adds up and it makes sense. And if it doesn't add up and it doesn't make sense and you're like, this looks like a lot less money than what we talked about, go back to the recruiter and make sure that everything is written in there correctly, because you don't want to get your first paycheck and it's $300 a week less than what was discussed over the phone. You need to make sure what's written in the contract is what was discussed before you sign it. And if there is a discrepancy, sometimes it can just be a clerical error. Don't freak out. Don't think, oh my gosh, the recruiter's lying to me. Just say, hey, this isn't what we talked about. Can you make sure this is right? And then they'll go and fix it.
Yeah, or it can just be a miscommunication. There are some situations where a traveler's been traveling a long time and they usually have pay package presented as net pay, and there's some companies now that will give you gross pay. So then say you accepted the job, you thought it was net pay, they thought it was gross pay. It's just a miscommunication, and then that's something you need to clarify. Either they can fix it, or maybe you don't want to take that job because the pay is actually lower than you thought.
Yep. So once you've reviewed your written contract, everything looks good, you sign it. Now it's official. Now you're taking that contract, and now you're going to work with your recruiter and the travel company to get your credentialing and onboarding done for this job so that you can officially start. Now, what's credentialing and onboarding? This is things like making sure that you have your license already. They'll ask you to send a copy of your license. They might need a copy of your CPR card. They need, maybe you have to have a physical, maybe you have to have a PPD test. Probably a drug screen, a background check, things like this. So they're going to start sending you some paperwork just so they can check all the boxes and make sure everything is intact before you can officially start working for this company.
Yep. The next thing you'll be doing is looking for housing. And ideally, before you ever accepted the contract, maybe even before you even interview for the job, just do it like a cursory search in that area, especially if it's an area that's more rural that might not have a lot of job options. You want to make sure at least you have some prospects. But you don't want to go too deep into that job search because you don't even know if the job will be a good fit for you.
Housing search.
The housing search. And then once you accept the job, that's when you really want to dig deep into the housing options and make sure you can find something that will be a good fit for you in terms of housing, whether that's a room in a house or a campground if you're in an RV, or if it's a whole apartment, whatever you need. But use sites like Furnish Finder, Facebook groups, Facebook Marketplace, and you can find housing that might be a good fit for you. Start contacting landlords, all of that.
Yeah, back when we were looking at our job options over the last 3 weeks or so, before our recruiters even submitted us for jobs, they were pitching us some options, and they were saying, this city, this state, this setting. And we would just real quick run a search on Furnished Finder just to see if there were options. And then we would say like, oh yeah, look, there's like 20 options here that could work for us in that area, versus if it was a really rural place and nothing popped up, we might be a little more concerned, like, is this going to be a place that we can find housing or not? But again, you're not actually like inquiring about the housing. You're just sort of doing a preliminary search to get a feel for the area. And then once you actually accept a contract, that's when you're going to start looking for your housing. Again, I said this before, but we have tons of articles and videos where we talk a lot more in depth about the housing search. For our recent contract that we just signed, and we're going to start April 1st, it's actually only a couple hours from where we're from. And so we were able to go and look at housing in person, which was really cool because you don't usually have that opportunity as a travel therapist. In most circumstances, you're going to be doing the housing search sight unseen. So you have to do it remotely, which means we do recommend in that case that you set up like a video call with the landlord and try to at least do a video walkthrough of the apartment to make sure it's legit and you're not getting scammed. But we were lucky this housing search, we were actually able to go look at them in person and decide in person.
Yep, and you want to make sure that you're not sending money to someone where you haven't even had any idea what the place looks like, or if it's a real place. There are scams out there, so be careful with that. Ideally, you don't want to give any money until you get there, but there are obviously situations, especially if it's an area that's very high demand where they have other people inquiring about the place, that you might have to give a deposit. But before you do a deposit or anything like that, check to make sure there's reviews, if you can do a video walkthrough. That really helps because then it gives you some confidence that the place is available and that it's empty. There's all kinds of scams out there where people will try to rent out a place that's not actually theirs, or they'll try to rent out a place that's already rented out. So you want to avoid those types of situations. Try to go through trusted sites, and if at all possible, do video walkthroughs.
Yeah, and sometimes you may even want to get something in writing before submitting a deposit. Make sure you get a contract in place. It has an official letterhead if they are an apartment complex or something like that, or a rental agency. Again, if you're renting from somebody and it's a private situation, you may not always be able to get that in writing, but just do everything you can to try to make sure that you avoid scams.
Yes. So once you find a house or a place that looks like it'll be a good fit for you, that's when you want to start packing all of your stuff up, getting ready for the move, start planning your route, how you're going to get there. If it's across the country, you might be looking at whether you're going to drive or fly. If it's if it's Hawaii, obviously you're probably going to fly there. There's some people that ship their car across the country, so you have to start thinking about all those and what works well for your situation. Are you somebody that, if it's a couple hours away, obviously you're just going to drive there. If it's 3,000 miles away and you only have a couple days to get there, well, that might be a situation where you're flying and you're renting a car. Ideally, if it's a long way away like that, you've already thought about how you're going to get there, but just make sure you have all that stuff in place, what route you're taking. Make sure, for us, a big thing when we first started traveling in our camper was knowing where we were going to stop for gas ahead of time, having all that planned out, stopping at truck stops instead of just trying to pull off at an exit and hope that the gas station was big enough for our camper to fit in it. So just plan all that out ahead of time just to avoid any unforeseen circumstances.
Yeah. So we'll just kind of do a recap here of everything we talked about, but if you do have any questions, if you are watching live, please just leave them in the comments and we'll answer them here at the end. If you are watching live or watching on the replay, we'd love if you would just hit the thumbs up button. Let us know that you enjoyed the video, that you learned something. If you're watching later on the replay or listening on the podcast, feel free to send us a message if you have any questions, whether it's via email, Facebook, Instagram. We're happy to answer any questions that you have. So hopefully this gave you guys a good overview of what the timeline looks like and just an overview of the process in general. So if you're more than 3 months out from beginning your travel therapy journey, this is the research phase. This is when you should be digging into all the free resources that we have on our page, talking to other travel therapists, getting an idea of what it's like to be a travel therapist. Decide if it's right for you. Is it the lifestyle you want to live? Start learning about the basics. Learn about tax homes. Think about insurance. Think about housing, think about putting in your notice at your job, just sort of start getting things in line and learning about what it is to be a travel therapist and the questions that you need to ask. Start writing down questions to ask the recruiter, questions to ask the facility, questions to ask other travelers.
Yep. Once you're 2 to 3 months out, contact us for recruiter recommendations. Tell us what you're looking for. On our form, we ask, what setting are you looking for, what states are you looking for, what benefits do you need, and we can kind of match you up with companies and recruiters that will be a good fit for your situation. Once you're in contact with the recruiters, that's when you would start game planning, like where are you going to go, what's the most likely state to find the setting that you want, if that's your primary concern, or if it's you mainly want a certain state, then you'll talk to the recruiters about what settings are often in that state and see if that's a good fit for you. And then you can kind of plan there to determine what licenses you need and what you should start working on right away.
Yep. And once you're starting to have these conversations with recruiters, we recommend narrowing it down to 2 or 3 different recruiters that you really like. You want to go ahead and get your profile set up with these recruiters at this time, get your resume, your references, all that stuff set up so that when you get within that about 6-week time frame from actually starting, that they can actually submit you to those ASAP start jobs. You're going to work with your recruiters to review the job options, consider which ones are a good fit, submit to 2 or 3 different jobs. You might get a couple of offers, and to have a phone interview, make sure to ask a lot of questions in your phone interview to ensure that it's a good fit. If you find a job that's a good fit and you receive an offer, you can accept that offer verbally and then let the other offers know that you've already accepted a job. You're going to sign your written contract, and then you're going to get everything set up as far as onboarding, credentialing, start looking for housing, and start planning your move.
Yep. Nick says the drug testing never gets less awkward, and that is true. We just went for drug tests a few days before we left.
I thought it went really smooth this time.
It did go pretty
actually.
smoothly,
Yeah.
and some places are so slow. Usually what will happen is the travel company will kind of set you up with where you need to go for your drug test, physical, that kind of stuff. And sometimes they choose a place that's not great. They might have a long wait. It might be just really busy. And this one actually was not too bad, but I mean, it is always weird doing drug tests. And I don't know, it is awkward.
Yeah. Let's see if there are any other questions or comments. Juan, how are you? He says, I always do that. When I get bonuses at the hospital, I assure that the bonuses are correct with HR. Always, when it comes to money, when it comes to contract details, you want to make sure everything is as discussed before you sign on the dotted line.
Yep, there wasn't anything.
And let's see, was that everybody? Good. Okay. Well, again, if you guys have any questions that come up throughout your travel journey as you're getting prepared and doing your research, please reach out to us, whether on social media, through our website at traveltherapymentor.com, or via email. We are happy to help. Again, we've been doing this for over 9 years, so we have a lot of information and insights to share, and we'd love to help you get started. Raul has a comment. He says, I just have one recruiter. She's okay. She usually tells me a little bit lower rates than the ones posted on companies' websites. Yeah, very interesting, Raul. So this is a really good point.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why that could be. It could be that there are some recruiters that are actually just trying to take advantage of you, especially if you're working with just one recruiter. It kind of puts them in a position where they can offer you less than they would be able to offer you because you don't have any other options. That could be one. That's not real common. It's not real common that recruiters are really trying to take advantage of you, because a lot of times they want you to work with them for multiple contracts. It could be that the rates that are posted don't include any reimbursements. There are some companies where they post rates and they're assuming that you don't need licensing, you don't need relocation, you don't have any expenses for relocation and things like that. And if you do want those things, then they'll subtract it out of the pay package.
Another situation might be that sometimes on the websites, whether it's that recruiter's same company's website or a different company's website, a lot of times they list pay packages as gross pay. And if you're not familiar, gross pay is before they take any taxes out. Because when they list them publicly, they don't know if the person who's viewing it or the multiple people that are viewing it, they don't know what their tax situation is. Whereas your recruiter who's working with you one-on-one can run the pay package example for you based on your specific tax situation. So if you tell them my tax filing status is single and 0 dependents, then they can run a rough estimate of the after-tax pay, which is going to be more accurate for you. That's called net pay. Versus on the website, they may just be doing a general gross pay because they don't know the person who's viewing its tax situation, if that makes sense.
Yep, and it also could be that your state taxes are higher than average, and that number that's on the website is just like a generic average state tax pay rate. Whereas, if your state has one of the higher taxes, then maybe that's a little bit less because they have to factor that in.
And then the last thing to consider, Raul, is are you comparing your recruiter's pay for the same job or a similar job to a completely different company? There are some companies that can pay higher for certain jobs. It just depends. But this is why it's in your best interest for you to have 2 or 3 different recruiters that you personally have interviewed, that you have trust with, and that way you can compare offers, because offers are not always the same between companies. Certain companies have, maybe a bigger company has more overhead, they have more money they have to keep aside for their operating costs. Maybe a smaller company can give you a bigger piece of the pie. There's just various factors to consider, so it's really in your best interest to talk to 2 to 3 different recruiters and compare pay offers.
Yep.
All right, and hey Morgan, hope you're doing well and hope your first contract back as a traveler is going well. And Morgan had gone perm for a little while and now she's back traveling, so yeah. All right guys, well if you have any other questions, feel free to either leave a comment or send us a message and we would be glad to help.
Yep, we'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
All right, bye.
Bye.